fashion designer and environmentalist. I call myself a fashion environmentalist because nature has taken precedence over all my designs, and it is the center of everything that I do. This has led me to partner with science-based organizations, governments, and nonprofits to get the message across and use fashion as activism to advocate for policy change. I have also worked with the United Nations Oceans Conference, where we developed a range of clothes using only nature-based solutions by reviving ancient indigenous techniques that use water which is contained in a trough, organic inks, and this prevents water wastage and water pollution. I've also partnered with the Prince Albert II Foundation for the Monaco Ocean Week, using nature-based solutions that could be replicated by micro-organizations and other designers for the protection of marine protected areas. So what you would find here is an interesting mix of people from different fields, from nonprofits to entrepreneurs, to people who have fought for eradication of microfibers and plastics and research. The reason I decided to bring this together, being a fashion designer, is because everyone knows the detriments of the fashion industry, or how detrimental the fashion industry really is. And we are finding solutions that could help the industry get better in various ways. I would like people to know that the arts also occupy a very important place when it comes to being together and tackling the current challenges that we have. The people you would see speaking are people who I have partnered with, and you would see garments and techniques that have involved their work, their scientific research, their analysis, and my fashion activism. We would also be discussing women empowerment, which I think is a very, very important topic, apart from plastic pollution and how seaweed can potentially help save the planet. So you'll find a lot of videos interspersed throughout the satellite session. Most of them have to do with nature-based solutions and art as activism. The first video that you would get to see is the art of water painting. It's a technique that existed in the Japanese royal courts in the 12th century. I presented this technique at the United Nations Ocean Conference, where I spoke about how designers could help mitigate water wastage and pollution. The reason being, we had just 50 liters that was held in a trough, and we had inks that were scattered on the surface. We printed 250 meters of fabric using only 50 liters of water. The inks were extracted from discarded flower markets, so they were mostly chlorophyll based. And it was a beautiful technique where we got out red carpet dresses. The other movies that you would see would be of seaweed, using seaweed and creating garments out of it, using cyanobacteria mats and creating garments out of it, and a lovely little movie which speaks about the interaction of poetry and the arts, and it's termed as eksphatic. Eksphatic meaning you have the poem that is translated into something which is visual. So I do hope you enjoyed the session and our wonderful speakers. And without further ado, I wish you all a wonderful start to the Ocean Decade for Sustainable Science, and look forward to seeing what we can do together for the betterment of the planet and our future. Thank you. So my next speaker is Mr. Vincent Doumeizel, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce him. He is a very passionate individual. He is in the forefront of the seaweed revolution. I had the pleasure of meeting Mr. Vincent. This was at the UN Ocean Conference, where he had the manifesto and he gave it to me, and you will hear a lot about him. But before I start, I'm going to probably read his bio. So Mr. Vincent is the senior advisor for the ocean for the United Nations Global Compact. He's the director of the food programs, Llyods Register Foundation. With 20 years of experience in the food industry, Vincent is now the senior advisor at the United Nations Global Compact on Oceans, as well as the director for the food program for the Llyods Register Foundation. Vincent leads the charitable objectives of the foundation through the funding of innovative projects to support the food supply chain, partnering with the UN, FAO, the World Bank, WWF, universities, NGOs, and large brands. Vincent has led and released the Seaweed Manifesto in a call to scale up the seaweed industry in order to address some of the world's most important challenges: hunger, global warming, pollution, poverty. Vincent is now co-leading the first international platform for the seaweed stakeholders, the Safe Seaweed Coalition. He is also the UN Global Compact lead contact for the UN Food Systems Summit and such activity, and he also actively supports the organization of the summit as well as the COP26 next fall. Thank you for being here for this really important event of the Ocean Decade for UN Ocean Decade for Sustainable Development. So I have a few questions for you. For those who don't know, you've been in the forefront of the seaweed revolution, and you've also released the Seaweed Manifesto. I would like you to tell us a bit about the Safe Seaweed Coalition and how you plan to actually solve these pressing problems, which are like global, which is global warming, hunger, pollution, and of course, poverty. So please, Mr. Vincent, the stage is yours.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation to speak. It's always a pleasure to work with you, Rina. And I so appreciate your work. So it's an honor for me to be here speaking with you. First of all, we will solve the problem of this generation, and it can only be all together. And when I say all together, that the basic objective of this coalition that we have set up is to get together. But let me step back a bit maybe and give some perspective about what is the potential of seaweed. Well, actually, seaweed has quite an unlimited potential. I think there are so many different types of seaweed. First, we know at least 12,000 types of seaweed, and we have learned to cultivate. We have domesticated only 10 or 20 of them at the maximum. The total surface, the total area where seaweed production is possible is around 66 million square kilometers. And today we are cultivating less than 2,000 square kilometers out of 66 million. So, I mean, we are nowhere. And I keep saying the same, we are in the Stone Age. We moved from prehistory to modern history when we stopped being hunters-gatherers back 12,000 years ago and became farmers. And civilization, it's all about farming. It's all about managing the ecosystem. To produce more and to make sure it is regenerative. We have not done that for the ocean so far. We are nowhere in the ocean. We are just dumping our waste in the ocean, and then opportunistically we are trying to hunt, or we call that fishing, or gather wild seaweed. In the meantime, we are destroying this ecosystem. And to talk about sustainable ocean, no, is a bit irrelevant to me, because when you have destroyed over 50% of the biodiversity in an ecosystem, you're not talking about sustainability. You're not talking about preserving. You are talking about restoring, regenerating, and that's where we are. And if you look at the ecosystem in the ocean, seaweed is the basic. It's the lowest trophic. So seaweed, dissolved seaweed, will feed the lowest trophic level, phytoplankton, filters, and so forth. And then they will, this one will feed small fish or bivalves, and they will then feed big fish, and so forth. So that's why it's important. First of all, we are in the Stone Age, and seaweed is the really basic of the ocean. What is the potential of seaweed? Unlimited, actually, because I mean, seaweed can be a source of food. I mean, very, very nutritional food, very, very important. a lot of fatty acids, of iron, of proteins, more than anything else. A lot of vitamin B12, vitamin C, vitamin K, and zinc, and so forth, and low fat, and very good stuff for all of us. Can be a source of feed, can be with a lot of interesting side effects like increased immune resistance of the animal, lower the need for antibiotics, or decrease the methane emission by quite large, which is a big problem for greenhouse gas in the world. Seaweed can also be a source of biostimulants, sorry. So increase the resistance of the plant. It can be a source of biopackaging, of textile, of medicines. We can do many different things with seaweed. We can restore man's sight. Actually, they manage to do that. So there's an unlimited number of innovation. It can also sequester carbon, and actually that's the only food or only resource that has a negative impact, because while it grows, it sequesters in the ocean because it's losing skin, it's losing cells, just like we are doing with our skin. It's losing cells while it grows, and these cells are carbon that are sunk in the ocean for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. So as such, it is a negative emission product, which is very rare. It cleans the ocean, it protects the shores because it limits the erosion of the shore. It supports livelihood, notably women. We see that in emerging countries, mostly women are benefiting from seaweed, and we see a large majority of women involved in the seaweed supply chain, even in developed countries, which is totally an exception in the world of the ocean. But if you look at fishermen, I'm not sure you will find a lot of fisher women, actually. So that's quite interesting in terms of gender parity and women empowerment. So the big question that comes next is, why is it not happening already? Why is it not there already? I mean, there's so many problems that it can address. And the main question, I think, is the lack of coordination and the lack of collaboration. So that's why we have funded with the Llyods Register Foundation, with the UN Global Compact. We have funded the first ever global coalition for seaweed, so Save Seaweed Coalition. You can all register for free there. If you are interested to know more about seaweed, to exchange with others, saveseaweedcoalition.org. Just register there. It's free. You can display what you're doing. You have an interactive tool. And the idea is really, I mean, of course, we will fund some project on this coalition. We'll fund some project to improve standards, safety standards for the product, for the environment, and for the workers in this supply chain. Not that it is dangerous or unsafe. The thing is that there's no consistency in terms of standards, and that is preventing the scale up of this industry. And it's not consistent because there is no one voice to speak on behalf of the seaweed industry. And here we are. I mean, we want to speak for this voice and say we need consistent standards. We need consistent regulation in order to scale up. And then we can start to think about how to scale up the production, how to ease permitting, how to raise awareness by population about all the fantastic things you can do about seaweed, educate people, eat more seaweed, use seaweed for textile, use seaweed for many different things. But the basic thing is standardized regulation, because if you don't have this, then your product, you cannot just put your product on the market. And once again, there's a lot to do on this. So that would be the first step. But you can get a lot of seaweed, you can eat a lot of seaweed, use a lot of seaweed already. There are fantastic projects. There's a real momentum. Jeff Bezos granted $100 million to support seaweed. There's a huge project in West Africa, for Southwest Africa, for $65 million. There's a lot of investors that are looking to invest into seaweed. They are also looking for a direction who I could speak with if I want to invest in seaweed. They had no partner to do that. Here we are as well. We want to be the one to speak with the investors and tell them, well, you can invest there, you can invest there, you can invest here, and so forth. That's our objective, is to represent this very nascent seaweed industry. And I'm not talking in that example for the North Asia, for the Asia. I mean, because in China, Korea, Philippines, and so forth, they are quite educated and quite in advance. They are producing a lot of seaweed, 30 million tons of seaweed, fast-growing business there. But in the rest of the world, in the South Asia and in the rest of the world, we are totally in the Stone Age. We are in the prehistory. So we need to move to civilization of the ocean. We need to reconnect our land with our ocean.
Yeah, it's true. Seaweed is definitely one of those mysteries that connects medicine, nutrition. It's important for the climate. And I just got off one of your talks with the World Chef, and I still remember you saying that it's a kelp forest. It's not, and the difference between the plant, the seaweed plant, and the seaweed. Correct?
Yeah, well, yeah, the sea plants are there are some sea plants that are growing in the shore, and they are not seaweed because the seaweed doesn't have any roots, doesn't have any flowers. So, but you have some plants that are growing near shore. So there's still a confusion, but more importantly, I think a strong message to deliver is that seaweed is absolutely an appropriate name. It's not weed. It's nothing to do with weed. It can grow up to 30 centimeters a day, up to 60 meters. You can feed people with this. It can have many different tastes. It is a wide diversity of organisms. The difference between a green seaweed and a red seaweed is bigger than the difference between a fungi and an elephant from a genetic point of view. That amplifies the number of applications that you can do with this. So let's call them sea vegetables because we need to speak about feeding people with them. Let's talk about sea forests because they are protecting biodiversity. They are sequestering carbon by large. And when you have organisms which are 60 meters high, it's not weed, it's a forest. And then maybe people will think about protecting the forest or reforesting, you know, just like we do with our land and with our forests on land. We need to, I mean, because seaweed are endangered at the moment. They are disappearing very fast because of biodiversity problems, because of ecosystem disruption. They are disappearing by large, and in California, which was a big forest of seaweed there, 80% of the kelp are gone. They are disappeared. And then there you just have desert because there's nothing there. And when you think about it, I mean, this ocean ecosystem, it contributes to 50% of the oxygen we breathe. So if we lose this ocean biodiversity, we might be in big trouble.
Absolutely. And I also want to kind of take away from what you just mentioned in your just like few minutes earlier, where you said that women are also being benefited by this, because we know, like with the SDGs, you have SDG 5, which is gender equality.
Absolutely.
And you also have a big problem when it comes to disparity, especially when it is also with the coastal communities. Number one, facing challenges because of commercial fishing practices, and at the same thing with the women. So how does this industry, the seaweed industry or the seaweed revolution, also help revolutionize women's lives?
Well, it's quite straightforward actually, because the thing is that the seaweed business is usually done by the fisherman's wife. So the fishermen, you know, they go at sea and they but there's no fish left. Actually, they are overfishing. If we would give all the subsidies in the world, I think subsidies in the world for fishermen are 20 billion per year. So we give 20 billion a year to pay people for overfish and to extinct species, which is, let's give them to those women who are working in the seaweed business. And the thing is that fishermen are trying to fish, but they have no revenue out of it. So the fisherman's wife, they are actually, because seaweed doesn't need any investment. You just put ropes on the ocean. You don't need any specific training. You don't need to be literate. And actually, unfortunately, a lot of women in emerging countries are illiterate, which is quite a problem as well. So, but you don't need many knowledge to you just need to put these ropes. You put some seeds. It grows again and again. In Tanzania, for instance, and you don't need to reseed. It grows again. You harvest. It grows again. It grows again, and then you just let it dry on the beach. Because and once it is dry, you can keep them for months. So it's a very simple business with very limited investment and very limited training required. So, and once again, it's easy for fishermen who are losing their revenues to ask their wife to do this, and that's how it happened actually. And now, once again, in Tanzania, you have 80 to 90% of the revenues that are going to women. We're not talking only about women collecting seaweed on the beach. We are talking about all these processing part and about all this academic part. I mean, the head of the cluster in Flower Msuya is the head of the cluster industry for seaweed in Tanzania. It's a woman. And even in the rest of the world, there's an amazing number of women who are CEOs of seaweed companies. And I was at a call the other day, and there was 8 panelists, and I was the only male actually there. And there were 7 women with me. They were all CEOs and so forth. And the main conclusion of this panel session was to create a network of female which are in charge for seaweed development, and we would call them the SEAWEED, you know. And I think that's in progress. I mean, I maybe they proposed me to be the only honorary male to be part of this panel, but I'm not sure if I should accept this. But anyway, I think they are there. But I think it's interesting, yeah, really, because de facto, I mean, you have a large majority of women who are working in this industry.
Yeah, very interesting. It reminds me of when we met at the United Nations for the Ocean Conference, and I had this sustainable line that I came up with. And the funny thing is that I actually employed only women who learned the technique, which mitigated water pollution and water wastage. So, and I used seaweed, and you told me it was seaweed. So it was a great.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it was a great connection. That brings me to my next question. I have shared with you some of the seaweed dresses that were made, which were made by this one particular seaweed. And we've also heard that there's kind of distrust when it comes to biomass or biomaterials used. And how do you plan to break through with this, especially with the connection with food and fashion? You know, because we know that seaweed can also be processed made into textiles. But generally, how do you break the mindset of people to understand that not all biomass is bad, but it can also be used for the good for the environment?
Well, I think that's exactly what we want to convey as a message. I mean, so far, if you look at this industry in Tanzania, in Philippines, and in Southeast Asia, we see that they are only using seaweed for the carginum, and they waste the rest of it. While it's full of nutrients, it's full of interesting polymers, it's full of interest. So the next step for us is to be able to have biorefinery who can really split the various compounds, so we can valorize each of them. So we can really have a resource that will be, once again, regenerative, because while it grows, seaweed restores biodiversity. So it's regenerative as such. And then if you harvest it, you can split it in various compounds, notably in textile, because it has interesting polymer for textile. And then valorize it in a different way, and then the farmers, the women, they have more money. Another project in Namibia who is expected to do that. I mean, exactly, it's the largest seaweed farm. I mean, it's not yet there, but they are planning to open in Namibia the largest seaweed farm in the world, hundreds of hectares actually. It will sequester as much carbon as the entire emission of the Netherlands actually, when it will be up and running full scale. And the biomass that will be produced there will be for textile and functional food mostly, and a bit for fertilizers. So it's a great source, and art is so important. I mean, because why? Because we need to convince people that seaweed is really cool. It's something really good. It's a fantastic food, but it has other properties. It's not the slimy, smelly, and unsexy thing that you walk into when you are at the beach. You know, that's much more than this. It has a lot of properties. I mean, yeah, it's time to get over this feeling that it's you know. And art is the only way to do that. Art is so good at telling stories. I mean, I'm fully convinced about all. I mean, I'm into art as well. I'm a musician, and I'm fully convinced about the power that, unfortunately, we cannot. We have not yet designed guitars in using seaweed, but I'm sure we will find a way. But I think art is a fantastic way to tell stories, to show people that what they first perceive as something invasive, dangerous, and smelly and salty can be something really, really cool and really good. And I think that's why it's so important, the work that you are doing, and that's why I'm so glad to support you, because I mean, promoting that and I keep I don't have it with me, but I keep displaying some during my talk. Normally I'm displaying some piece of things like looks like wood, or like things which looks like plastic glasses, and they are all made of seaweed, you know. And that is so powerful to display this kind of polymer, or this kind of objects, because that's really convincing. People see, wow, that's made of seaweed, but that looks like wood, that looks like, and this piece of this building brick that is made out of seaweed is 3 times stronger, harder than oak, actually. So it can really be interesting. So there are so many different uses, and I think the work you're doing with textile is such a fascinating work, and I think there's a lot to do into that. And we are at the very, very beginning for art, for fashion, but even to replace textile, we know that cotton is a very unsustainable production. We know it needs a lot of pesticides, a lot of water, and so forth. So let's stop using cotton. I mean, we've got a lot of seaweed to grow, so let's do it.
I completely agree. And I do not think seaweed is unsexy or slimy. I think it's one of the most beautiful things I've ever come across. And thanks to you, I've learned so much from you and everyone who's listening. The most enigmatic person, Mr. Vincent, I've learned so much about seaweed. And if you want to learn more about seaweed, please get into the safeseaweedcoalition.org. My other question, since I'm a fashion designer, I have to ask you this. And I do a lot of activation, right, to kind of get people to be engaged with, to understand products like seaweed and how it can actually help people and the environment. I would like to hear from you. What were the thoughts that came into your mind when you saw the collection? And what is to you the connection between fashion and food?
Well, I mean, fashion or I mean, getting dressed and food is one of the basic needs that we have. First of all, I mean, we need to get warm and we need to get fed. That's what we need. So that's 2 basic needs. So if seaweed can fulfill these 2 basic needs in a way or another, that's so cool. And of course, you can use it for functional dress or for functional food. You can also use it for gastronomy or fashion, as you do. I think that's the same. I mean, they are all the same. And but to get to it, I mean, we need a lot of activism indeed, and we need some activist people. That's why I'm talking about a seaweed revolution, because it's a full mindset that needs to be broken. I mean, we have this wrong perception about seaweed, but the thing is that we are all activists. We are all environmental activists at the end of the day. I mean, each time we buy something in a shop, whether it is to get dressed or to get food or just either each time we click on something we like, I mean, we are environmental activists. We are, I mean, people are looking at what we are doing. We know that we live in a world that is fully connected now, and we are all connected to the same garment system, to the same food system, and people are monitoring what we are doing, what our choices are. And each time we drink and we buy something, we are environmental activists. 4 times a day, we are, I keep saying the same, we are environmental activists, and we shape the world we want. So let's do it all together, and we have to be activists. And we are all part of this revolution. You are leading the pack in terms of the fashion part. I mean, we are trying to support for the food part, but we are all working in the same direction, which is to give a different perspective to seaweed and make people understand that it is the greatest untapped resource we have on the planet at the moment, and that it can really address the generational challenges that we have.
Yeah, perfect. The perfect coalition between this
exactly.
Is the with the coalition. This is exactly, you just summed it up perfectly. Perfect.
Exactly.
So my last question to you is, now this program is to do with an engaging and inspiring ocean. And you are an engaged and a very inspiring person yourself. So I would like to hear from you, in your words, what does an engaging and inspiring ocean mean to you personally?
Well, it means we should once again reconnect land and ocean. This is not parallel systems. This is not different system, and we should reconnect them. They work. It's a global ecosystem. So engaging, it should be connected with the land, because seaweed has the potential to clean the agricultural runoff, for instance, and they will provide compounds of interest for plants and for animals and for humans. So it's all a circular economy. And I think an engaging and inspiring oceans would be all a circular economy, but a regenerative one once again. We should stop this extractive aquaculture, this fishing industry that we have, which is in a predator. We are a predator in the ocean. So we should stop that. I mean, we should be managing the ecosystem. We should develop a permaculture in the ocean, a regenerative system with multi-trophic aquaculture that are regenerating themselves and that support the land, that support life on land. And I think that's the way forward. And that's what is an inspiring and engaging ocean is to me. Totally regenerative, permaculture in the ocean, ecosystem services for ocean and for land. We have not been very good at telling story when it comes to the ocean so far. It is absent in most of the strategic discussion. There's no UN organization for the ocean, for instance. Why? What is there anything more international than the ocean? I mean, is there anything more cross-country than the ocean? But no, but there's nothing more. But there's no UN organization for this. So I think we have to tell stories. We are and art and food, and there's very good ways to tell story. And we need to inspire and engage people through the stories to reconcile land and ocean and make them work all together to sustain a world of 10 billion people, because that's what it will be at least. So, and to sustain and to feed and dress these people in a safe and sustainable way, which will also mitigate climate change, which will restore biodiversity and support livelihoods and notably women. That's the engaging and inspiring story that I have for the ocean.
Fantastic, Mr. Wasso. Nobody could have said it better. It was beautiful. I always learn a lot whenever I speak to you. So everything is really inspiring. So you're going to be at the COP26?
Yes. We'll
Okay,
be pushing
good.
hard for this on the UN Food System Summit and the UN Ocean Summit as well. So yeah, we are pushing hard, and also with the private sector and the NGOs and the academics. We need and support primary production. Yeah, because things are not only happening in these UN meetings, and a lot has to be done on the ground and boots on the ground or boots on the ocean, I would say.
Yeah, so hopefully we can meet each other then. Hopefully everything should be clear.
Hopefully, yes.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
It was lovely having this discussion with you, and
my pleasure.
Looking forward to a lot more that can be done with seaweed, with the intersection with art, food, fashion, clothing, and the circularity and the systems that can be put into place. Thank you so much for taking this time and being a part of this really important event. And I wish the Seaweed Revolution and the Safe Seaweed Coalition all the best.
Thank you very much. Wish you all the best as well.
Pupilla. I accidentally became a plant with green shoots of veins distracted by your wind, trembling. I would have been a root with deep tentacles sunk into moist earth, until you pulled me above ground, where I stand exposed to your breath, lost in the firmament, waiting for your pupilla duplex to see me for what I am.
So my next guest is one of my favorite people, and that's Michael Stanley Jones. And I'm going to give you a brief introduction of him. So Michael Stanley Jones is a program management officer with the United Nations Environment Program. He supports the knowledge management and digital transformation within the ecosystems integration branch based in Nairobi. As a co-secretary to the UN Alliance for the Sustainable Fashion from July 2018 to September 2020, Michael advocated for engagement with the textile and apparel industries on the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. He also serves as technical support for the UNEP focal point on small island developing states. Thank you so much, Michael, for joining us and for this really important event for the United Nations Decade on Ocean Sciences for Sustainable Development. So, yeah.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah.
It's nice to be with you again, Run.
Yeah, and you're in Prague, so thank you so much for making all the time and in your very busy schedule to be a part of this program.
You're welcome. I'm actually not quite in Prague. I'm on the southern border of Czech Republic, Austria, in South Bohemia. So it's Prague is the center of Bohemia, but I'm on the far southern edge of it.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah,
okay,
it's a beautiful place.
I can imagine. I can imagine. I'm going to ask you a few questions. So you are a poet, an environmentalist, a man of many things. But we collaborated on this one project for Earth Day, where we had your poem that was translated into being a garment. I would like to ask you how important activism of this sort is when it has to mobilize people to understanding the environmental issues that exist, and how could it actually translate itself into being of importance?
You know, over 30 plus years of collaborating with the United Nations and serving directly in the UN Secretariat for the last 17 years. I do a lot of writing and I do a lot of research and advocacy. UNEP, the United Nations Environment Program, has an advocacy mandate, which sets it apart from most other UN agencies. We're not just technical, we actually have to move people to action. And that's all the more important now with the 2030 Agenda. We have less than 10 years remaining on that, and the world has fallen behind, unfortunately, not only because of COVID, but also, for example, on the biodiversity targets that were set. We checked in on 2020 and we haven't met a single one of them. So, you know, we are really hard pressed to make this planet sustainable for people and for nature. All of that brings me to your question about, you know, how the arts play a role in all of this. As an advocate, as a professional advocate for sustainable development, I'm not only appealing to the head, to the minds. I'm not just using science to change behavior or to motivate people to take leadership on these issues. I need to communicate to the heart. And art has an amazing ability to speak across borders, across cultures, across time. Art has a kind of universality about it that can bring messages and create motivations in ways that prose and sometimes dry facts do not. So it's really my commitment to combining the best of what appeals to our intellects and the best of what appeals to our hearts, so we can bring both forces to play on behalf of sustainable development. And it's charming that you call me a poet. I did not practice poetry for the first 5 decades of my life. I only started a few years ago to write poems upon demand. You know, people were retiring or they were getting married or having babies and wanted to celebrate those transitions, those milestones in life. So I took up my pen as a communicator and tried my hand at writing a few verses, many of which I've blessedly tucked away and buried. But a few actually were catching and compelling and helped people celebrate their lives. And so that gave me further motivation. And I've made it a practice now to try to write, across all media, to write speeches, to write articles, to write reports, to contribute to science, but also to write poetry and lyric poetry in particular. One of the benefits, one of the strengths of my poetry is I'm very, very brief, much more verbose in an interview than I am on paper. Brevity is one of the charms of my poetic output.
I'm a big fan of her poems, that's for sure. I love everything that you've written. That brings me to the next question. The poem Pupula. Now that is something which I aired before we started this interview. So could you explain what that poem actually meant? Because everyone has seen the translation of the poem and you reciting it, but I would like to know, I mean, if you could tell us what it actually meant and why did it resonate for Earth Day?
Okay, it's somewhat risky for the author to claim control over the interpretation
I'm putting you in a spot. I'm putting you in a
spot. Yeah, so I guess I could qualify it by saying, what does it mean for me? Or what did I think I was doing when I wrote it? I don't want to be too biographical about these things because that sort of colors everyone else's interpretation. But with those safeguards in place, that everyone's free to interpret a written piece as they can or wish to. They own the interpretation. I can give a few hints about what happened when that poem was being written. That poem started when I was sitting in a garden and I was looking at a plant that had aerial roots, that is, roots that are above ground, flying around it in a kind of chaotic manner, while the center of the plant was rather straight and sturdy looking. So that contrast between the freedom of the root structure flying around in the air is what motivated me to go inside afterwards, and that evening write down that poem. And I wrote that poem in about 1 hour. It's a quick production, it came and flowed very quickly. Did I know what I was up to when I was writing the poem? No, I don't think so. I only had the first phrase in mind when I picked up the pen. I accidentally became a plant. What I think when I finished the poem, what I think happened, or could be happening in that piece, is that it's a love poem. It's a love poem between a plant and nature. So it seemed highly appropriate to use the poem to honor Mother Earth, because that's the source of love, right? Our relationship to our Mother Earth. And what I borrowed during the composition of that poem was an image from the history of art, Pupula duplex, which is a strange image that does not exist in nature, but exists in the imagination, particularly of painters who have created an image of one eyeball that has two pupils floating together or conjoined in one eye, which is a phenomenon that does not happen in the real world or in nature. There are no examples, but you can go back in history and even Renaissance painting, you'll find images that artists have made of this. And for me, that image, Pupula duplex, contains something of the duality of nature, that nature is beautiful and benign and giving, but nature also can be very violent and very destructive. And nature is a struggle. It's a struggle to survive. It's a struggle to withstand shocks, like we have seen in our pandemic year, the horrible year we've gone through globally. But also there's a kind of duality in each of us. Okay, we may not all be plants, accidental or no, but we are sometimes struggling with our masculinity and our femininity and the duality of being male, female. And that's reflected also in the history of art and many religions. So I borrowed Pupala Duplex and put that in the concluding lines of the poem to bring out that dual vision where we can see ourselves struggling to exist in a natural world, but to do it in a harmonic way, in a loving way, which is something we in the human environment are still learning how to do.
Yeah, very true. I completely agree with you. And that's what Mother Earth is all about, right? Acceptance. Yeah. And us getting to know who we are at some point. True. That also brings me to the next question. I remember we spoke about this was some time back when we spoke about peace and the oceans. And you said you did some work on the Danube.
I did. Before I joined the United Nations Secretariat, I was an academic. I was a visiting lecturer at a Czechoslovak university. Later, the countries separated into two independent states. So Czech and Slovak universities had hosted me. I spent 3.5 years in Central Europe. And I volunteered at the request of a conservation organization, a green group, that was monitoring the development of the Danube Environmental Protection Convention. It's a longer name, but that's a short name for it, the Danube Convention, which was being negotiated at the time to protect 10 nations' international waters, the Danube flowing through those countries jointly. So that brought me into contact with the United Nations. I had not set out to become a United Nations officer. I joined quite late. I was 46 years old when I joined the UN Economic Commission for Europe at the invitation of the ecosystems, the environmental division. So I'm now with ecosystems division. And I also worked with UNEP on the negotiation of that treaty. So there's a little bit of the background, but on oceans, I have a kind of different profile, because after I left Central Europe in 1996, I tried to bring the lessons that I had learned of working with green groups and governments to bring multinational coalitions together to support the environment, but also to support peace, because during the mid-90s, there was a horrific land war in Europe, in Southeastern Europe. I don't want to review all of that, but we had a resolution in the final Danube Environmental Forum conference that I helped organize and curate. We had a resolution on war-torn environments, and the thought was that through environmental restoration and through exchanges between the environmental communities of different countries, even countries that had formerly been at war, we could build peace, but we could also build trust and restore humanity through environmental action. And that's what we had done in Serbia, in Croatia, in other, stressed environments that had been damaged through the violent conflicts they had undergone. And so I like that. Bringing together environment and peace. And now, decades later, UNEP, my agency, has documented most conflicts, most violent conflicts in the world have, we believe, at their base, the conflicts over natural resources.
Yeah.
The scarcity of land, of water, of food. These are the real drivers of conflict and war. Fighting over natural resources, minerals, petroleum, all of this is well documented. I think I'll speak loosely now, but I think we documented in one survey about 70% of world conflicts had natural resource at their base, as a causal trigger of those conflicts. So it's very, very important that we use our work on the environment to solve that tendency for conflicts to spiral into violence and become wars. That lies at the root of much of what causes war.
Yeah, so the environment can actually bring people together if we look at it.
It can, and that's part of my mission, is to make sure that the environment is, you know, I didn't pursue a career as an environmentalist, as a conservationist, although I did work and support organizations through volunteer action, like Sierra Club, Loma Prieta chapter, which I believe is the chapter you live in, San Mateo County. So that's Loma Prieta, the fourth largest chapter of the Sierra Club in California, I believe. And there I actually did work directly on ocean conservation, but I wouldn't call myself a conservationist. I directed Clean Water Action and the Clean Water Fund California office for a year before I joined the United Nations. And I worked on ocean conservation issues in that role. I also worked in coalitions of green groups in California that supported protecting marine resources. So particularly estuarine resources, the San Francisco Bay and San Francisco Estuary. So I was on the board of Friends of the Estuary for a number of years. And I worked on pollution prevention planning for a number of years through work with the state Regional Water Quality Control Board and the Regional Water Quality Control Board that I did as a representative of community organizations. So I have, some background in conservation, but I never considered myself a conservationist. The true blue person who puts nature at the center of all of their thinking. For me, nature always included humanity. Humans are part of nature. And so environmental justice was my entry point into working on the environment. And I continue in my work at the United Nations Environment Program to advocate for equity, environmental equity as a core concept. You can see that in the introduction of equity and the strengthening of gender themes as cross-cutting themes of the Global Environment Outlook Report, the 6th edition that we brought out in 2019. For the first time, equity was recognized as a cross-cutting issue that touches on all aspects of the environment and is important for conservationist goals to be achieved. So I directly work on the Poverty Environment Action Project, a joint project of UN Development Program and UN Environment. I've been working on Poverty Environment Nexus since 2014, since I came to Nairobi. The environment be looked at in the context of humanity, be looked at from the perspective of equity and human rights, including gender rights, to be complete and to really be to deliver what we hope, which is a harmony of people and nature that we all strive for in sustainable development.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more with you. It's so true. Absolutely.
We'll have trouble having an argument. We're not going to be a crossfire candidates for a future crossfire show. We are too close in values, perhaps.
Yeah.
But that's okay. Once in a while, it's nice to be in harmony with your friends.
That's perfectly fine. My other thing is that we're speaking about the ocean being an inspiring and engaging ocean. That's a theme for this event. So as an inspiring and engaging person yourself, I would like to hear from you. What does an inspiring and engaging ocean mean in your own words?
Oh, I grew up near the sea, sometimes even on the sea, off of Banana River in central Florida, near Cape Kennedy, Cape Canaveral. So on the Atlantic seaboard. Also, first memories of visiting the Gulf of Mexico when I was a toddler living in Alabama and learning to swim in the sea. That was like rebirth for me. So anytime I was actually born in California and conceived in the big island of Hawaii. So we had a lot of island culture in our family. My mother's family had partially grown up in Hilo, Hawaii, and where I was conceived. Anytime I get close to the sea, I get a very special feeling of maternity, of origin, of nature embracing me. And my favorite sport is body surfing. I never picked up a surfboard because I never wanted to have any object between me and the water, just direct contact.
Yeah,
I don't know, just made that up, but it's true. I've never surfed, but I body surfed all my life since I was a child. And swimming in natural water. I have to say, I have a slight preference actually for freshwater swimming. So swimming in the Ardèche River in France is maybe the peak experience of contact with water. But I had a nickname when I worked in California. People were calling me the water guy, which I used to contest that. Of course, I love water. I love fresh water, estuarine water. I love brackish water, and I love seawater. But no, I used to say, no, I'm not the water guy. I'm the mud guy, because estuaries are as much about mudflats and seasonal wetlands as they are about water itself. Water is universally admired. Mud, less so. So maybe I was being a little bit cranky and trying to defend mud and estuarine environments that they entail. I was born off of a slough in Suisun Bay, California, by the way. So wetlands are close to my heart. But that said, what inspires me about the sea, the sea connects us all. One of the most powerful maps I ever saw, and I did live with a cartographer for a long time, is a map that shows not the continents in their relationship with the sea kind of just in the background, but actually mapped the world's oceans prominently and gave a perspective of the earth from that made the seas connect all of us. And that connection that is inherent in the seas, how waters flow across the surface of our planet, that's I think the most powerful image that inspires me to work globally on sustainable development and peace.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Michael, for everything and all your insights and your poetry and your passion for the environment and the connection with peace and bringing people together and the oceans being a part and the center of it all, which I think is so important. Is there anything else you would like to say?
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure.
Anything else you would like to say for this fantastic event of the Ocean Decade?
Oh, don't tempt me. I'll keep talking. Let your listeners and your viewers take away what they can. But I'll be pleased to come back and talk with you again as we work on this Oceans Decade.
Thank you so much, Michael. Pleasure. The next guest I'd like to welcome is Cassia Patel. She's the Program Director of Oceanic Global. She oversees the grassroots initiative, policy reform efforts, education and programming, and manages the Ocean Initiative. So Cassia, thank you so much for joining us for the United Nations Decade of Ocean Sciences for Sustainable Development. As an environmental engineer, an underwater research biologist, and a program director of Oceanic Global, you've probably seen the plastic pollution explode over the last decade. We also know that fashion contributes largely towards the plastic pollution with microfibers. How have you effectively managed in working towards the goal of plastic elimination and also effectively communicating it to the general public so they can take a stand when it comes to marine litter?
Absolutely. And I think what you've highlighted, Runa, is so, so important, just that this issue of plastic pollution entering our oceans, entering our waterways, impacting us and our health, the health of our communities, has really exploded recently. Plastic has only been mass produced 60 to 70 years ago. So this is a very recent challenge that we're addressing, and we're really seeing this blow out of proportions. On the positive side, we are seeing awareness about our plastic pollution crisis significantly increase, even just over the past few years. You know, the literacy and the vocabulary of the general public with relation to these challenges is significantly increasing. So that's been really inspiring to see. And then as well, considering the role of fashion in this broader challenge is coming more clearly into focus. We now know that not only do our clothes that are made out of synthetic fibers, polyester, spandex, nylon, are they shedding microfibers, so microfibers of plastic into our waterways every time we wash them, but actually just wearing them and giving them wear and use, walking on the street, pieces of rubber coming off of our sneakers and others, you know, it's actually shedding even just in the wearing and usage of these clothes too. So it's beyond just the washing. So it's something to really consider and to keep in mind. Our efforts started with Oceanic Global, actually launched in 2017 with a festival, an ocean and arts optimism festival in Ibiza, really bringing together music and fashion, technology, dance to help people to celebrate the ocean while integrating educational information, solutions, tools, workshops, youth-oriented programs, so we can really start thinking about how to tackle this challenge. And on the fashion note, one of the projects that was a part of that initial event actually was working with the schools around the island to collect plastic collected on the beaches around the island, to then also work with the Parsons School of Design students to create costumes made out of this upcycled material to facilitate that discussion around, you know, what are we finding on our beaches? How does that impact? Where is that coming from? How can we change our practices and our behaviors to prevent that from happening? So our focus at Oceanic Global really is on driving scalable behavior change. How can we take action in our own lives as individuals, as communities, as families, and then also in our businesses? So we do work a lot with restaurants and hotels and stadiums and music festivals to eliminate single-use plastics in their operations and how that translates. Similarly, in the fashion world, working and providing guidance to designers as they're thinking about which materials to be using and how to be vetting true solutions. There are a lot of ideas around how we can be better upcycling materials, and so there are a lot of projects that are currently ongoing using upcycled plastic water bottles, for example. And similarly to how this is a recent problem that we need to find solutions to, there is a lot of R&D ongoing in the space. And so we're learning a lot about what works and what doesn't. And we are seeing that some of these upcycled textiles and fabrics are actually more likely to shed microfibers because they're made out of degraded plastic. So it's just really important to actually be testing for shedding in these materials. And that's one thing that we start with as a baseline in recommendation to designers and manufacturers to just consider actually testing the impact of those products. We're actually also partnered with Conservation X Labs on their current microfiber innovation challenge. And so this was a big call out to all innovators around the world of all ages to apply to offer solutions to this challenge, really focusing on prevention upstream. So how do we design alternative materials and textiles that do not shed or that are not made out of synthetic materials? And then also how do we prevent prevent these materials from shedding, and how do we clean that up within our infrastructure, so that we don't have to worry about this downstream, and that this doesn't fall actually on the consumer downstream to handle and to deal with in the methods that we currently have. So so those are a few ways that we really focus on addressing this challenge, tapping into different creative forms of communication, and ultimately empowering us all to recognize that we have the power to create change in our own lives, and that we can and have the opportunity to be a part of the solution.
That's awesome. So there's so much of education that's also mixed with the advocacy, with the things that you do. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. My next question is that Oceanic Global has always been in the forefront, like you just explained, with the arts festival that you actually kind of created the entire, the nonprofit out of. So with Oceanic Global being in the forefront of arts as activism, to engage the youth for the rights of our seas, how has this power in the arts helped in advocating for clean seas?
That's a great question. And actually coming hot off of the recent Ocean Heroes Boot Camp, spearheaded by Lonely Whale and Captain Planet Foundation, where we hosted a session on artivism, on digital arts and fashion, and the role that that plays in driving forwards campaigns. And this was for a youth community. And I think it's so important because with a lot of this information, when it comes to environmental challenges and issues, particularly pollution and plastic pollution, at this point, we know what the issue is. We can describe the issue, we understand the issue. We also know what the solutions are. We have tools and technologies and concepts and ways to describe what those solutions are. That said, a lot of the general public is still missing that nuance and that detail, and doesn't have all of those tools themselves. And so what's missing is a communication, a bridge between the academic and scientific understanding and the general public, industry leaders, policymakers. And so art can really form that bridge and can really help to cross that divide. If we're talking about a fashion collection, if we're talking about imagery and experience, sculpture that you can interact and walk through, a coloring book to offer to children, to weave in messaging and recommendations while they're at play and while they're learning. And so there are so many ways we can be integrating different mediums of art into the work that we do to engage a broader audience, engage people who wouldn't otherwise be coming across this information, or have the awareness and tools, access to technology to be pursuing that information too. So meeting people where they're at is really important to the work that we're doing. And I think that that's only supported by taking these more creative approaches. Another aspect of that too is by working with musicians and artists and influencers, people who do have a broad reach and a broad network, who can reach people who may not otherwise stumble across our channels or stumble across other ocean conservation channels, or even documentaries that are out there as well. So tapping into more of that public awareness via different advocates and ambassadors. And so that's something that we do focus on as well. And something that you can see quite strongly too in the UN World Oceans Day events and series, and bringing voices from all walks of life and all communities, including the public sphere, to bring this added attention and awareness to ocean issues, and also to make it fun, to make it celebratory too. One thing that we do believe is, if you want to change the world, you have to throw a better party. And so it has to be fun and inspiring and exciting for people so they don't feel overwhelmed. And I think it is really important to the sustainability of the sustainability movement as well.
Absolutely, I completely agree with you. You need to throw a big party to get people involved. That's for sure. And I think art has the power to kind of create this global movement. And the merger of science and arts, exactly like you said, is so important, because that's the only way you can have a larger outreach, and a lot more people could be involved in something as important as this.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. So our collaboration with cyanobacteria, which you remember. So this was like the fabric of the oceans, right? So we try to look at it as being an alternative to plastic, a regenerative textile. And it was an important collaboration because we use fashion as activism. But I would like to find out from you coming from the science-based background and also a nonprofit that advocates for clean seas, how important was this collaboration in terms of the message it had and the impact? And do you think collaborations of this sort with science and nonprofits, I know you've spoken about it, but I'd like you to elaborate a little more about this. How could it be beneficial in the future? and why?
Absolutely. This was a really special and unique and really valuable, incredible project, Fabric of the Ocean, working with you, Runa, last year, even through the midst of the pandemic, managing to still bring this to fruition and to share this with the world. And I think this is a really great example of how arts can intersect with communication. To your point, as you mentioned, highlighting algae as an alternative to synthetic fabrics and to move away from synthetic fabrics and the microfiber pollution that they cause by embracing regenerative plant-based textiles. That is absolutely a really strong message that exists there, and which drives forward that behavior change component as well, recognizing that we have the power to choose which brands, which companies, which clothing we're supporting and purchasing. As well, and on the other side too, the other aspect of that campaign that I thought was so exciting and interesting is recognizing and honoring our relationship with the ocean, our fundamental and essential relationship with the ocean as our life source on this blue planet, and celebrating cyanobacteria, celebrating algae as the incredible producers of oxygen on this planet as they are, and recognizing that these microorganisms were the first oxygen producers on this planet. They're responsible for creating the ozone and the atmosphere that we live in, and are currently responsible for more than half of the oxygen that we breathe every day. So whether we're in a coastal region or in a landlocked area, as a daily reminder that we are connected intrinsically to the ocean, and a healthy ocean means a healthy planet, means a healthy community, means healthy people. And so from our perspective, this collection also really highlighted that essential relationship to our ocean, and the precious life source that it is. So alongside that, finding a reciprocal relationship with our ocean means choosing better textiles, making better choices in our daily lives to respect that relationship so that we're not polluting our life source. So kind of holding both sides of that story together in that campaign, and even just through the imagery and through sharing that imagery and the education and conversation. This was one of the examples actually shared with the students in the Ocean Heroes Bootcamp, and it was actually one of the most inspiring examples. A lot of the students were like, wow, I had no idea you could do this and create this. I'm curious, what are the materials that are in my community? How can I raise awareness? There was actually, to share a quick anecdote, one young woman near Lake Victoria who really wants to bring awareness to community's reliance on the health of Lake Victoria. And so just to start by having people fall in love with the lake and to recognize, and to celebrate everything that the lake offers. And so she was deeply inspired by our Fabric of the Ocean campaign in particular. So exciting to see how that's already, creating and causing more waves in this space.
Yeah, it's a fantastic campaign. I loved working with you guys on that. And I'm going to share the campaign also on this at the session after the end of it, so people can take a look at what was created.
Yeah.
So my last question to you is, we know we are talking about an engaging and inspiring ocean. I would like to hear in your own words, what does an engaging and inspiring ocean mean to you as an individual?
As an individual,
Yeah.
I love this question. An engaging and inspiring ocean, and I like that you use the word engaging, means it is something that is really interactive, something that we can touch and we can feel and we can celebrate. I think this means also having living and working waterfronts. Oceanic Global is based in New York City. New York City is a coastal city, which is something that people often do forget. And we're right there, we're on the ocean, and there are more and more efforts to bring people down to the waterfront and to celebrate the river and the ocean, and the fact that there are seahorses and dolphins and turtles and sharks right there in the ocean right there. So I think an engaging and inspiring ocean is one that is connected to communities and to us fundamentally, whether that's through recreation, through tourism, through livelihoods, through fisheries, through shipping and maritime transport, as well as through the fundamental services it provides, like the oxygen and temperature regulation that I was referencing. So an engaging and inspiring ocean means to me, it's more, I think, about our recognition of that encompassing system that we are a part of, and then finding that reciprocity with our ocean, and finding that balance. And for those who are not in a coastal region too. That just means that could be interacting with your waterways. If it's lakes and rivers, it could just be interacting within your own community and just being conscious about what are you pushing down the drain? What are you releasing in the waterways? How are you disposing of your waste? And what are you choosing upstream to prevent any waste and other pollutants from being created? What are we choosing to eat? And how do our diets actually impact the ocean and the planet more holistically too? As a choice that we make 3 times a day, if not more, how can we be really thinking about and engaging and inspiring ocean in each of those actions and moments, while taking time to play and to enjoy the ocean and to feel filled up with the ocean and with the beauty of this planet that we're fighting to protect.
Absolutely. Everything is interconnected. And that's the reason we would always call like Mother Earth. And there are in parts in India where we would like look at the ocean as Mother Ocean, because it gives everything to what gives us what we need. Beautiful. So yeah, so thank you so much, Cassia, for being a part of this very important satellite event. And while I let go, I'm going to let the audience get to see what we created together for the fabric of the oceans. Thank you.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Runa. And yeah, happy decade of ocean science.
Happy decade of ocean science. My next speaker is Prajapati. She's the founder of Upasana and lives in Auroville, which is an international township in the south of India. She has won several accolades for her social entrepreneurship and has also been invited to several TED Talks. Join me in inviting Prajapati. So thank you so much, Uma, for joining us for this important satellite event for the Ocean's Decade of Sustainable Science and Sustainable Development. So the United Nations has 17 SDG goals, and of which SDG 5 is extremely important. It speaks about equality. We know there's a lot of gender disparity that exists in the industries, not just here, it's all around the world. But as a social entrepreneur, how have you managed to bridge the gap between both the sexes in your organization? And if you could just give us a gist about your organization and what you do.
So, hi everybody, my name is Prajapati. I live in a community called Auroville in southern part of India near Pondicherry, and it stands for human unity. So there's a lot of SDGs goal are very much part of our lifestyle over here. I run a fashion brand called conscious clothing brand rather. It's called Upasana, which is part of Auroville, and I'm heading projects and mainly around women empowerment or craft community, grassroots community empowerment. Since childhood, it had been my focus that gender is an issue, and me being born as a girl child in Bihar, I saw it very early that it was not okay. And there were many things were not okay. So that has been informing throughout my professional career that I work a lot with and empowerment, livelihood has been my sector of work. So it's kind of a lifestyle now. It's not something especially I do. Last 25 years, I have worked on it rather very seriously. And now it is part of me. So currently, COVID, I also saw that artisans would need support. India has 54 million people work with craft, textile, and clothing sector. It's one of the largest in the world, I would believe, and more than half of it are women. So even this sector alone is able to intervene in gender equality as a profound way. And being part of fashion activism for last 20 years, working with farmers, working with weavers, working with grassroots communities and ladies and so many people across in different states and region in India. It is, I feel very grateful today to be able to intervene in that level, and it is emerging in big way. We are now supporting women post-COVID to come in front, working with the cooperative women entrepreneur, artisans, and creating a platform to support them. Apart from that, I have been active in COVID Widow India team, which is facilitating a space for COVID widows to integrate in society in a beautiful way. And that has been, we have not even realized that how deep is that. So it very recently, the sisterhood and supporting women in distress has been very part of my work, and is still going on. I'm very much in the center of it.
I think it's excellent, Uma. Fantastic. Even the mention of taking care of Indian widows is such a huge step in the right direction.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for enlightening us as to how things can actually be taken forward in the fashion industry and how the gender disparity can also be closed in certain ways. My next question to you is, we all know about your extremely world famous project Tsunamika, which is your brainchild and your baby. So I would like you to tell us a little more about Tsunamika and how this project helped women in displaced communities. If you could tell us the story about the tsunami and how Tsunamika came into existence.
So I live in Audu village, at the very close to the coastal part of Tamil Nadu, although we are very close to Pondicherry. When tsunami hit, it hit us. We were at the very middle. The coastline from here is just 6 kilometers, and many of our community was very badly destroyed during tsunami. And I was on the road, running around, trying to see what has happened. There were a lot of people who were wet, and they had come to our community, and we had set up, within 3 hours, Audible was running tsunami rehabilitation camp, which was one of the earliest one across at least the world. It was running, cooking food, and I had ran into that place and asking the organizer, what can I do? Give me some work. And they said, take care of the children so parents can plan. And I turned around and see the children were asking for attention, food, wanting to play. Parents were shocked, and they were completely kind of stunned, and nobody knew what to do. Nobody has an answer. I walked into a woman who was my age, like a ghost. She looked through me, and that shook me. I've never met somebody like her, and even that is 15-year-old, I still remember her. And my only prayer in that moment was that I wish I can make her smile. And very soon, I was given 35 children in soon means in few minutes time, literally. And I made them a group of 7. And there was this in 30, 40 minutes. Everybody was occupied in making the art. And what I'll call my studio to send me some colorful clothes and scissor and few needles, some colorful threads. And here we were. I had no idea what I was heading into, but this little Tsunamika was born. And she was born in whatever fabric was available, fashion industry, waste is, we have tons of waste, a brand new waste, we are known for it. So I was in the middle of all of that without realizing what to do. I was overwhelmed as anybody else. And it was during that time when I was spending time in the villages and going from the village to the village and meeting these hundreds and hundreds of women I have never seen. And anything I'll ask them, their answer was in a Teriya de. So I would ask, what do you know? And she simply would say, I don't know. Teriya de. What would you like to do in life? I don't know. And I was quite shocked to have, no matter what was my question, answer was very fixed and very clear. I do not know. And I was writing in my journal that if community loses faith in life itself, how do we restore that? Can design restore that? And for me, it was a journey of design and social responsibility. As a creative person and a fashion designer, I always looked at design as a power to intervene and make change. And for me, it was a creative problem solving. And when I got the studio scrap in the village and the camp and began to work with the small bits of textile, I didn't have much resources myself, but I knew I had this. And we dump even brand new clothes and beautiful goods in the landfill as a part of our marketing strategy. We are known for it. But I was using the small bits of fashion scrap to create a doll to heal their trauma, so they would be able to have another line than just saying Enakateria de. I do not know. So Tsunamika began, and we had gathered women from each village, and they were so ready. They didn't resist. They didn't say, why are you doing that? Why should I make a doll? What will happen to me? Will you pay me for making a doll? None of this conversation came. They just started making doll. And later they said that we were so tired of sleeping, crying, eating and sleeping and crying, that you brought a fourth dimension in our life, that we were able to sit and do something. And that I had not planned. It just emerged from them. And third day every day I will go on and spend time with them and work with them. And third day I saw that their hair were not standing in the air, they were flat, and their saris were more tidy. So wow, what happened? They begin to realize that they were going to a common place with other women and they will make something together. That the little sense of being was coming up. And one day there was a fight in the camp on the fifth day, and the issue was two women got into really getting angry with each other. And first one had said that your doll looks as crooked as you, and that's it. It was a fuss, and rest of the women just burst cracking. They were laughing. Nobody has laughter. Nobody had laughed in the tsunami coastline after tsunami for many weeks and a month. But that broke ice where a woman laughed in someone, and it was so silly. The whole of the community laughed, and I cried. I was sensitive of that space, of that there was so much trauma in the air, that we be able to crack that space, and there is a need for us to express our emotion. And it's so silly, but it is the first emotion of laughter. And we could laugh at ourselves and the journey of Tsunamika, since it has not stopped, you see. Now today, Tsunamika has gone to more than 80 countries and 5 million doll, and we never sold the doll. And that has another story. I was making this, like there was some 1,000 women was making doll, and you have no idea how much doll was made. Doll was getting produced from the ear, nose, trees, plant, grass, everywhere. There was a doll, and people were just flooded. And I got so scared. Oh my God, what will I do? So I used to go to the schools and beg them to take dolls. So said, may I give you 2,000 doll? How many children do you have? They said 500-600. Can I give you 2,000 doll? And they were like, who are you? My doll? What are you saying? Hang on. And I said, see, don't take my time. I have to give you 2,000 doll. Please take it so I can go home. So every school I draw 2,000 doll, so the doll could be produced. And there was a floodgate open of Tsunamika dolls, and there was a laughter, joy, and anybody could think of had the doll, and it was a tsunami of hope. People didn't know, but there was so much of this doll happening everywhere that it took over my own life. I came to my workshop and my manager was standing like that and saying, Uma, you do whatever, but stop your story at the village front. Huh? The moment you come with this doll in the campus of Upasana, I will not let you in. We don't have a space. We have enough things to do. We can't handle that. Do you get me? And I was scolded by my own manager. So I'm like, yes, I get it. Oh, what do I do? So I was grabbing people and saying, please take some doll, please take it. And they would say, do I pay you for something? I said, no, you already pay. Your payment is that you have taken doll. And it touched people so much. So one day after a 2 months and so of making a doll and making thousands of doll and all the schools getting flooded with dolls, everybody else had the doll and society was dollified by Upasana and me. And they were, we did the business strategy saying, okay, let's send the doll to the market now. Now we have too much doll, we have to do something about it. And I met a guest that day in my studio, and she came, and I talk a lot. You will soon realize that I talk a lot. And I was talking to her and was telling this story and gave her some dolls to her, and blah, 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 blah. Sunamika's story was delivered, and I went to work. After 10 minutes, I saw the lady has not moved, and she was still standing in front of my studio at the door. So I quietly went out and seen what happened. Let me just see. And she was doing like that, and she was crying. I was so scared. So I'm so sorry if I said something stupid. I didn't mean it. Did I hurt you? Should I give you a glass of water? What can I do? And she went on sobbing, and finally she looked at me and saying, no, this one. She was holding the doll. She pulled out her hand from her chest and saying, this one. It's such a beautiful way that somebody else is alive and somebody's finger is working. And it was my turn to cry. I didn't know what the heck was on. I said, oh my God, what should I do? It's so powerful. And next day was the strategy meeting. So before my team has presented the 2-meter long Excel sheet, you understand that we calculate a lot in Excel. We really use them very nicely. So the whole presentation was on, and I went into the meeting shivering a bit, and I said, you know, we will not sell the doll. And they all looked at me saying, what's up, Uma? I mean, you are just too much. Every day there is some another idea. And what are you saying? I said, no, the lady was crying and she said she's a symbol of hope. How can we buy and sell hope? Who is rich enough to buy hope and who is slimy enough to sell hope? I'm not slimy enough. I will not sell hope. I can sell a doll, but not hope. But from waste of fashion industry, transforming into becoming a symbol of hope was a huge journey for Sunamika. And the beautiful story of Sunamika is that she is an ocean child. She's born in an ocean as a symbol of love and hope during tsunami within the coastline community. And what is powerful about is that if anybody can talk about ocean, it is Sunamika. Because for Sunamika, ocean is her home. So our first book of Sunamika as a Sunamika meets friend is basically an ocean girl is arriving at the land, and her arrival was tsunami. It's a beautiful love story. It also had been endorsed by UNESCO, went for 7 international translation, million copy, and again a tiny little book. This is the second version, says Sunamika, Ocean My Home. So second edition has come in. And it's so beautifully coinciding with the UN agenda of this ocean journey. And I just see that any boy, any girl, any school, if we have to tell the story of the ocean, we should use that. We should use her and use this. And project is big enough to do this. I would love that, Runa, you become ambassador of taking Sunamika to this ocean journey and take it international. Children must know that we cannot live if ocean does not live. And message of Sunamika is very simple. She very lovingly goes to her friend and saying, you know what? I want to go my home back. Will you give my home? My home is full of your garbage. Could you give my home back to me? Isn't it powerful? That's what we have done to Sunamikas, and home is a ocean is our collective home. It's a big home, which is Sunamika's home, and she wants to go home. So it's another love story of cleaning the ocean, but not saying, guys, you trashed the planet, guys, you really have done a nasty thing to the ocean and put your act together. No, very gently going back. And that's her way. She wins people's heart by love. And that she has done. And other beautiful part of the story is that when we give Sunamika, we still don't ask for money. We don't take money. So it is a community supported project. Last 15 years, whatever donation had been coming to Sunamika, we make more Sunamika and we distribute more Sunamika, and communities in our fishermen community, second generation girls have joined Sunamika project. they say, I have seen my mother making this doll, now I want to make it too. So here I stop Sunamika's story. And you become ambassador now, Runa, while interviewing me with this one.
What a
Thanks, Sunamika, to
beautiful,
the world.
what a fantastic story. I always can keep listening to this story. It's beautiful. It's something which is so inspiring, and it's absolutely apt for the engaging and inspiring ocean that we are speaking about. And speaking about an engaging and inspiring ocean, all that you have said is so engaging and inspiring by itself. So as an activist and as a fashion designer, I would like to hear in your own words, what does an engaging and inspiring ocean mean to you?
You know, ocean, we think ocean is at the beach. And ocean has nothing to do with us. So if I go to swim, or if I go at weekend at the beach, I may look around and say, hi, is there anything else? I don't have a connect with ocean. We don't connect to ocean. Our connection with the ocean is the beach. We are very, very selfish creature, you see, or our ocean connection is seafood, period. I have been looking at it. If ocean has to be becoming part of our life, we need a vehicle to do that. And I as a designer and activist myself, I saw, and I'm very deeply into design and social responsibility. I saw this little one has access to that. She has this power of becoming a vehicle. So right now I'm into engaging conversation with children, children's parents, and NGOs, a woman enterprise. And she's a woman, you see, she's a mother archetype. And half of our world population is female, by the way. And the rest of the male and female children are part of that female. So world family is very, very closely knit if you look at it in that point of view. And my dream is to take Sunamika's journey saying, ocean is my home and I'm your friend. Let's talk about, and you have taken my home from me. And there's something happens in the heart saying, oops, did I? I didn't mean to, I didn't mean it. So when Sunamika's story goes to the school, children have done beach cleaning, children have done plastic catching, putting up and using the bottle to plant and really look at how to protect in their ways, and their parents got involved. So as long as, Runa, I don't manage to connect to, or I don't connect to ocean as my part of my life, it's not going to work, because I will think about ocean when I go to beach and when I eat seafood. It's a bit weird, but it is like that. And we need to have that emotional connect with this one has it. So that is the way I saw it. And I have been part of this project for 1.5 decades. So there's a lot has happened, and I have seen many things have shifted, but in a very, very beautiful way. We leading by love and leading by that connect and inspire people, not to kind of defend them or put them into a polarity space, but collaborative space. And this girl has a magic to build that collaboration, and I'd rather give her the chance and go, girl, play it out. You know, we both are Indians, and we understand that when Amul girl in India is a very powerful entity. She's 60 years old, but she's still this teeny girl. No, she was created in 60, so she's kind of now she's 60-year-old. She's so powerful. She can talk about politics. She can talk about a political issue, very, very controversial issue, and we can get going with it. Can we have, let Sunamika talk about serious issue around ocean? Yes, she can. So this is what my next design project is, to build that communication around her, and it is around ocean. So it's, I mean, in the last 2 minutes, I have repeated 20 times ocean. I mean, it's very close to me. So that's what the point I'm driving home.
Excellent, excellent. I had such a wonderful time speaking to you today. And like I said, I cannot keep I would never stop listening to the story of Tsunamika. And hopefully next time when I meet you, I definitely want one Tsunamika doll to keep for myself.
Just post me your postal address. You will get a packet full of your office. Yeah, that we keep doing all the time. So
thank you so much, Uma. It's so important that fashion designers learn a lot from you and follow your footsteps, because this is exactly how fashion can bridge the oceans and humanity. So thank you so much for being a part of this very important session. And I look forward to a lot more discussions with you. Thank you.
great. Thank you, Runa. Be her ambassador, be Tsunamika ambassador for ocean protection.
So my next speaker is Rachael Zoe Miller. She's the founder of the Rozalia project for clean oceans, and she's an expedition scientist, an entrepreneur, inventor, and National Geographic explorer working to protect the ocean. She's the founder of the Rozalia project for clean oceans, a nonprofit working on the problem of marine debris, and the co-inventor of Cora Ball, the world's first microfiber catching laundry ball. Rachael lends teams on exhibitions whose scientific results are published in peer-reviewed journals and educational programs that inspire thousands of people of all ages. She has presented at venues worldwide, including the TEDx stage and the Explorers Club. Thank you so much, Rachael, for joining us. I do remember that a few months ago, you were on an expedition on the Hudson. So could you tell me or tell us a little more about what the expedition was all about?
It was an amazing expedition. Some expeditions just kind of come together. It doesn't mean everything goes well, but spectacular people, a goal that we can reach, and great partners. So that is when we started working with National Geographic. And this is actually on that expedition. So what we did is we sampled the Hudson River from Lake Tier of the Clouds, where she starts, high in the Adirondack Mountains, every 3 miles, all the way down through remote alpine areas, through agricultural areas, through suburban areas, industrial zones, past Manhattan to Ambrose Light, where the Hudson meets the Atlantic. And at each of those locations, depending on the situation, we tested the surface of the water just above the sea or the river bottom, mid-water column, also the soil when there was actually dirt to be found, and we did air sampling as well. So we're looking for microplastic and microfiber pollution to
Was all about.
It was an amazing expedition. Some expeditions just kind of come together. It doesn't mean everything goes well, but spectacular people, a goal that we can reach, and great partners. So that is when we started working with National Geographic. And this is actually on that expedition. So what we did is we sampled the Hudson River from Lake Tier of the Clouds, where she starts, high in the Adirondack Mountains, every 3 miles, all the way down through remote alpine areas, through agricultural areas, through suburban areas, industrial zones, past Manhattan to Ambrose Light, where the Hudson meets the Atlantic. And at each of those locations, depending on the situation, we tested the surface of the water just above the sea or the river bottom, mid-water column, also the soil when there was actually dirt to be found, and we did air sampling as well. So we're looking for microplastic and microfiber pollution to understand it in a really as a holistic way as possible. It was one of the first expeditions to do such comprehensive testing, and the one with the highest resolution, meaning that every 3 miles is very high resolution. And we also did some pilot studies within that month of very intense science. And those pilot studies or studies within the big study, one was wastewater treatment plant cross section. So we can see on a navigation chart where a wastewater treatment plant's effluent comes out into the river. It's marked. And so what we did is we sampled the surface, the midwater, and just above the river bottom. So 3 vertical samples, 3 samples vertically at the 0, at the effluent, but then also at half mile, 1 mile, 1.5, and 2 miles on either side. And we did it at a rural location, a suburban location, and then right like south of Roosevelt Island between Manhattan and Brooklyn. After a rainstorm, there was definitely a lot going on there. So that was one study within the big one. And the other one's really interesting, was a contamination study where we were investigating the effectiveness of anti-contamination protocols, which are in place so that when people get environmental samples looking for microplastic, including microfiber pollution, they can be confident that what they're reporting has not fallen off of the researchers' own clothing. So that was really interesting. And we also on the expedition got to support some science enabling innovations. One is this tape that makes the whole vacuum filtering process just a little more robust and safer, and really revolutionary, from Staffordshire University in the UK, our partners. And another was an in situ microplastic sampler. So this machine that you would just drop in the river and it pumps water through and it can identify and count microplastic. It was early days for that. So that still has some little bit of work to do, but they're getting there. That company is called Ocean Diagnostics, but we were the first field test for both of those.
Wow. That's
It's
quite
cool.
a bit. Yeah.
It was a lot. It was a lot. And we had great partners, and we even did some education programs along the Hudson River, and it was fun, I have to say.
And
We're still writing up the results.
And what do you think? I mean, you've been in this line of research for like several years. Do you think you've seen an explosion when it comes to this kind of microplastic pollution, or generally plastics in the ocean? Or do you think it's like status quo? It's been around the same?
That's such a good question, because what has changed the most, or what's the easiest to track in terms of changes, is the volume and quality of the science being done to understand the problem. So we started Rozalia project in late 2009. So we kind of started talking about trash in 2010. And that was relatively early. I mean, people didn't really want to talk about their own, much less anybody else's trash back then. You know, we could roll into a town and we could always find a beach that needed cleaning 100% of the time. Didn't matter where we went. And we are collecting ongoing data sets at some of the islands in Maine. Interestingly, those repeat cleanups that are comparable, because we're going with approximately the same number of people, we're cleaning up the same square area, and as far as we know, no other people are cleaning in between our cleans. And those numbers are kind of holding steady, which I suppose there's arguments for that being good and bad. But one thing that's happening in the microplastic side of things is we only learned about microfiber pollution as it related to clothing, and then very specifically washing clothing. That was discovered by research team at the University of Plymouth in the UK in like 2011. And we learned about it in 2013, where it was still really not even close. It wasn't even mainstream in the scientific community at that point.
Wow.
It was early. And so we set out with 3 goals. So we heard about this problem of microfiber pollution. And I know that you can identify with this, but like the problem screamed at us. It didn't just whisper or speak to us. We thought, oh my God, this is going to be such a serious problem for our ocean and for our public waterways. And no one knows about it, but everyone's experienced clothing going threadbare. You know, everybody's experienced a once scratchy something getting soft or getting thin. And I know, I can admit, I for one had never thought about what was there, what had been there. I never thought about where it went. And it turns out that it's going into our environment, that's what's happening. When our clothes break, these little bits from the fibers that make up our clothing are making their way into our air and then falling out of the air onto the land, although there hasn't been a lot of information about that, and then into our waterways. They're being swallowed by creatures. And so we set about to do three things. We wanted to contribute to the not very much information at the time. So we wanted to contribute scientific information, understand it better. We wanted to see if we could come up with a solution and try to stop it, just stop it a little bit while other solutions in other industries were being worked out. And then third, related to that, is raise the awareness, like sound the alarm and start talking about this problem that affects everyone who wears, washes, or dries clothing of any kind. And so in so doing, with that awareness raising, not just with consumers, but people who work way upstream of consumers, like making textiles in the first place, especially synthetic ones, although we pay attention to kind of all of them, all the way to revolutionary clothing designers like yourself who are paying attention to not just the end result of something beautiful, but the start and the source, and being so consistent. Really, what you do is so amazing and it's so important. And we wanted to spread the word among, other people, perhaps like yourself, who haven't heard about the problem, and inspire them. So those were the three goals that we had back in 2013 when we first heard about it. And we've been
That's amazing.
Working very hard in kind of each of them to try to make an impact.
I just have another question. In terms of your research, when you started off with researching on plastic, and then you said in 2013 was when you understood that the microfiber pollution from clothing was entering the oceans, right? So what is it in terms of the volume when you look at the microfibers from garments reaching the oceans? Of course, everything reaches the oceans through, whatever reaches the land has to meet the seas. Yeah. So what, according to you, has been the weightage when it comes to clothing really contaminating the oceans because of its microfibers, and the other plastic pollution, which are like numerous, but
so much. So this is a spectacular question because it certainly kind of gets at the heart of the opportunities to inspire, especially large companies and governments, to jump in and work on making an impact. And here's the reason I don't have a number or even a proportion, because microfiber pollution is made up of individual pieces of material that could be so small that we need a pretty high-powered microscope to see them. And so you could have, so some studies have just looked at washing machines, and one garment, one long sleeve acrylic garment, could shed 700,000 individual pieces of microplastic per garment per wash. And that goes out into a wastewater treatment plant. There's wastewater treatment plants have been shown to, so they're test the influent, which is the stuff coming in before it gets treated. And then they can test the effluent, which is stuff going out before it hits the river after it's been treated. And there are some wastewater treatment plants that are getting 90% out. So they find 90% more plastic in the influent than effluent. However, they're not finding where that 90% went. And a lot of wastewater treatment plants take the sludge, which is the solids, and do a very smart thing, which is kiln dry it and turn it into fertilizer. It's an amazing adaptive reuse. So who wants to fill landfills with or burn something that has value? But it is suspected that the balance of that plastic might be in that sludge, in which case it's just getting put on fields, in which case it still ends up in the environment and downstream. So, okay, so that's numbers and volume and just microscopicness of the microfiber pollution. So then you take something like derelict fishing gear. Derelict fishing gear, you could have a net that is a kilometer long. It rates as one object versus, you know, when you're like tallying it up, versus 700,000 individual objects. However, you could definitely fit all 700,000 pieces of microfiber that comes off that one shirt probably into like that much of the fishing net. And so it makes comparison really, really hard. Even if you took like the water bottles and the like Doritos bags and food wrappers and straws and all the other consumer debris and single-use plastics that we know are entering our world's ocean and quantified them, there still is a problem because those are like bigger than a microfiber, but smaller than a huge net. And so weight, the derelict fishing gear wins on weight, but kind of loses on numbers. The micro stuff wins on numbers, loses on weight. It makes it very hard. So I think a way to look at all this is to say, well, what's the potential harm? And what are the opportunities to prevent it? And kind of where do those exist? You know, it's conceivable that you could pick up a kilometer long net, you know, one RFID tag on there or some kind of locator is reasonable ask on a kilometer long net, and you can pick it up with equipment. But picking up microplastic from the ocean, that's a big ask. Like it has to be prevented. Yeah. And that's the way we kind of look at some of these problems. And then you take consumer debris sitting in the middle. And that's really interesting because you can look at it from really upstream and say, well, could we not have it exist ever? Like, could we do better with more reusables and not have single use a lot of things? And then you land at the, okay, well, it exists. And there's a lot of reasons for some of it to exist. Now we need to deal with its end of life and intercepting this stuff so that before it kind of is done, it can either be something again, or, you know, we can intercept it before it can leak out into the ocean. So that would be a combination of waste management and recycling or upcycling or design for end of life strategies for the consumer debris. That is a little more cleanable, but it's still kind of hard to just clean the ocean of stuff that's the size of a candy bar wrapper.
Yeah.
So it's hard. It's a really great question, but it's a very hard one to answer.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, the plastic pollution, it doesn't matter what size, right? It's detrimental no matter what. It could be like a microfiber, it could be like a plastic bottle, it could be something that you see. And like a net that you said, like a kilometer long, it really doesn't matter. Everything is damaging to the environment. That
and in different ways.
Sorry?
And in different ways, like damaging in different ways. The little things can be more harmful to the little creatures. The big things are more harmful to the big creatures, but we need all the creatures. We need all of them.
Yeah. And everything kind of works together in harmony. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. That brings me to your invention, the Cora ball. So tell me about this baby of yours and what does it do and how does it actually help us with the microfiber pollution?
Yes, I introduce you to the coral ball. And speaking of sea creatures, this was inspired, its very design was inspired by a sea creature, and its name, it's inspired by coral. So we'll back up and say, this is what we came up with to help stop the problem back when in like 2013, we're like, we got to do these things, microfiber pollution. So we thought about filters and things like that, but our engineering skills kind of weren't up for that. That's a very hard problem to solve, to catch very, very small things without backing up your washing machine and flooding your apartment. So we decided to go for something that was like an in-drum device, and we came up with a bunch of really bad ideas that didn't work, as it happens. And eventually we stopped and sort of broke it down. And we said, okay, what needs to happen to be successful? And we needed to catch small things from moving water. We need to keep the water moving, so we didn't plug your drain and flood your basement, but we needed to catch these little tiny, can't swim themselves pieces of fiber. And that's when we realized coral does exactly what we needed. Coral is stuck to a rock and it catches small bits of plankton from moving water. And so if you see right there, these are very coral-like stalks in this laundry ball. It's very soft on the outside, soft on your clothes. So you drop it in the washing machine and it cruises around with, not against, with your clothes. And fibers that have broken off or washed off can get stuck in these stalks. And when a little bit of fiber gets in, it usually helps collect more fiber. When you have a lot of hair, like I do, that also gets stuck in there, which is a bonus. We used to have 2 Newfoundlands, like super fuzzy, huge piles of doggy love, and their hair used to get stuck in here too, which was nice. And then the hair helped collect more fiber. You clean it like you clean a hairbrush. So when you see a fuzz ball, you just pinch it out. For now, we got to throw it away, just like we throw away dryer lint. But someday we might collectively find a way to upcycle all of our laundry lint. So both washing and drying lint. It's part of the solution, in my opinion, to mixed fiber recycling or upcycling. A big challenge, as you know, in the fashion industry is this kind of end of life question, and the myriad different materials that make up our collective textile industry. So the coral ball, yeah, easy to use. And another thing is that, so as far as efficiency, we've had people, completely independent universities test it. So it had nothing to do with us, completely independent, published in peer-reviewed journals, catching up to 31% per, like, of the fibers that would otherwise wash out your washing machine in a load. And also recently found to help protect your clothes by reducing shedding in the first place, which we appreciate. Yeah. So that even if you don't see a lot in there, the coral ball itself is making there be less breaking of your clothes.
Interesting. Yeah, very true. And I completely agree with what you said with the recycling of lint. That's something which has always been on my mind. I don't know. I mean, yes, it's a good thing we've kind of collected all this, but what do we do with this? Because it's anyways going back to where it's supposed to go, you know, into the ocean. So
yeah, and it depends where you are. You know, the way we see it is that certainly in the US, our waste management systems really should be the end point for stuff like this. You know, it's like in a bin bag. The landfills are technologically good. I know that there is occasional leakage from landfills, but as far as this stuff being kind of quickly or readily bioavailable, it is a much better premise and much better action to get it in the bin. The other thing is some communities are doing waste to energy, and then you're guaranteed that it's not getting back in. Now, there may be other issues with that process, but at least on the sort of microplastic escapee problem, that's not happening.
Wow, it's helping in some way. At least there's a solution in some way. Yeah,
it is. It is. It's better than landfill. You know, when we've been looking at this so much, you think, well, you can't go from like terrible to perfect, and there are degrees along the way in between, like the worst for the environment and the best. And yeah, you know, landfill littering would be the very worst, or just unfettered, what we'd call leakage of stuff.
Yeah.
And then landfill is pretty low. You know, landfill is you're not getting anything back. It's just a dead end. Yeah. And it's taking up precious space, and it's producing terrible gases. So waste to energy is a step in a better direction as long as the emissions are controlled. But at least you're getting some energy value out of this stuff. So it's a tough one. You know, going all the way up to eliminating waste would be the sort of top of that pyramid, I think.
Exactly. What is the smallest size that you would term as a microplastic in your research?
The technical term would be, people are looking at nanoplastics now.
Wow.
So yeah, and I think I don't want to mess it up on the definition of nano. It's some like thousandths of like in terms of size of a micron. So a micron is a thousandth of a millimeter.
So you've got
And
like
then
this super
small.
powerful microscopes kind of going through whatever is entering the oceans
The
and
most powerful.
yeah.
In fact, actually, I didn't say it before, but one of the other samples that we took on the Hudson River trip, we used these little tiny, cute little vials, and we like used a syringe practically and syringed up a piece, a very small amount of the sample that we were also taking the full liter from and putting it in this little tiny vial for a partner in the UK called Luminex. And they have some very advanced optical sensing equipment, and they're going to see if they can see nanoplastics from our samples. And then we'd be able to see if there's a similar pattern. So like where there are more microplastics, so micro would be under 5 millimeters. So we're talking relatively big. 5 mil is usually about half the width of a pinky nail, give or take.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's like big. And then
That's big.
yeah, and then to think about what we're talking about, microns, like if you take one strand of your hair is generally 60 microns to 100 across. So think of something small enough that you can fit 100 of them just in the diameter of your hair. And the microfibers that people have been finding in sea creatures and in the water are down to 2 microns. So, I mean, and then maybe nano as well. So it's, you can see how I was saying, like back end, this is not a cleanup solution here. Like you can't clean that up without doing harm to everything that's bigger than that, which is not everything, but the vast majority of what's in the ocean. So this is a real prevention challenge.
Yeah.
And there are multiple industries who have an opportunity to innovate, to kind of jump in and make a difference on making our clothes more resilient, on handling the clothes that we do have with the most appropriate methods, stopping what we can that does escape, and then, like you said, maybe someday looping it all back.
Yeah, fantastic. I could have this conversation with you all night long. It's like, it's like never ending with the solutions and the challenges. I think it's really interesting and it's fantastic what you're doing.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, we don't have much time, so I'm going to ask you if you could tell me what an engaging and inspiring ocean means in your own words.
For me, I love that. An engaging and inspiring ocean is one where is when the people are connected to it. And so for me, that connection happens by having the opportunity to first know a river or a lake or a pond. I'm sitting here on a mountainside in Vermont at the headwaters, what this little snaky, beautiful, twinkly little stream that will eventually be part of the White River, that will flow into the Connecticut, that will drain into Long Island Sound, and like right there's the Atlantic. Or people who are on the coast and get to put their feet and their hands and their whole selves into the salty sea, whether it's cold or not. That is engaging and inspiring to just first get to know it, but then to take it to the next level, to start to understand the challenges and the relationship between us humans and the ocean and her creatures. And then finally, what's inspiring is when people love the ocean because of this knowledge and understanding And for me, that ultimately, to put those three things together, that what is engaging and inspiring for me.
Absolutely wonderful. That's so true. You said the fact that people should love the ocean, because from where I come from India, they call it like the mother ocean. You know, they believe that everything that they have is from the ocean. So, and they also worship the ocean, you know.
We should all. It's responsible for our very breath.
Exactly. That's true.
It is.
Yeah, exactly.
I do as well.
Yeah, it's mesmerizing. It's something that you can never fathom, and it always gives you the answers. It's something, and probably that's why we're a part of this important event, right? It kind of brings the like-minded people together, and hopefully we can mobilize a lot more people to come in and take action for the oceans.
I hope so too. And maybe this is a good time to throw out there for people that are watching and listening to this that are thinking, I need to be on the boat over that person's shoulder, this boat.
Yes.
And you know, Runa, yeah, so you are coming. You're already, we've got you signed up. But we do bring people, and we want the most diverse backgrounds, academic and professional backgrounds, geographic backgrounds. We have people on board, even our scientific expeditions, we bring on a guest artist to be involved and express the experience of being part of this work in their own media, whatever that is.
Awesome.
Or medium. And we go out with education programs, but we don't just have teachers. We have scientists and policy people. We have startup people. I once had a woman who, by trade, she was an accountant. And the thing is, though, she was the mom of 2 lobstermen. Her 2 sons were both lobstermen. We were operating off the coast of Maine. There's a lot of derelict fishing gear and fishing debris from the lobster industry. And she lived on an island with her sons. And she, right in like the heart of fishing country, she identified as an environmentalist. And she was a fascinating addition to our crew of scientists and policy people. And, you know, at one point she's like, I don't know why I'm here. We thought, because your perspective is so important. You are raising people whose profession, like their livelihood comes from the ocean, in a little bit of a controversial way, a little bit. You're an environmentalist. You live on an island that doesn't even have a ferry to it. Like, you got to drive yourself. And her perspective was amazing. And the ideas that she brought to the conversations that we were having about how do we interact with fishermen who they're not necessarily tossing trash over their shoulder. They're not necessarily littering, but in a lot of cases, they're also not being as careful as they could be.
Yeah.
And how do we not blame, but get change? And it was great. So that was a bit of a tangent to say people can come with us. Minimum age 18. Oldest person we've ever had was 71. You got to have a little bit of awesomeness, being down with our mission. And we do occasionally ask for special skills like videography or educators, but that kind of thing. And just keep in touch with rozaliaproject.org.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Rachael. And thank you so much for all your inputs, your insights. It was definitely very eye-opening.
Thank you. And thank you for everything you're doing, hosting these conversations, and for your own exquisite and innovative work.
Thank you so much, Rachael. Thank you so much for being a part of this program. What a wonderful session. Thank you all for being a part of it. I learned so much. I learned how storytelling is really important, how art can get to your heart, how livelihoods are entwined, how tsunamis can actually create hope, and how women and coastal communities can actually benefit from seaweed farming, how the oceans can promote peace. And for me, what is an inspiring and engaging ocean? It's exactly this. I can't do this alone. You can't do this alone. It's us coming together for the betterment of the future and the oceans that we want. Thank you so much.